After 3 years, I finally found my husband, who had gone missing during our honeymoon. However, no matter whether I broke down in despair or became hysterical, he remained completely cold and calm, having suffered from amnesia. The heir of the wingers you keep talking about really isn't me. Don't come looking for me again, or Nora will make me sleep on the sofa. The doting on another woman in his every word pierced my heart with 1,000 holes. Just as I was about to give up, I accidentally overheard his friend asking him, 3 years ago, just to be with Nora, you faked your death during your honeymoon with Hazel. Now you want to go back to living the good life as the heir of the wingers, so you're pretending to have amnesia in front of her. Don't you think you're being too hard on her? Jeff slammed down a glass of alcohol. Nora is already pregnant with my child. I must let her into the family. I gave up all hope then, turning around to stop my in-laws who were about to rush over. Lydia, Daniel, I've seen him in person. This man is not Jeff. I had just hung up the phone when I ran straight into Jeff Winger as he walked out of the bar. Seeing me, he froze for a moment, then shook his head helplessly. I've already told you many times, stop coming to find me. I really am not your husband. A trace of pity appeared on his friend's face, and he advised me, Hazel, you don't look like you've slept well for several days. Go back and rest first. I shook off his hand and looked at Jeff. It's not several days, it's 3 years. From the day you went missing, I haven't slept a full night. I was called a jinx, blamed as the culprit who caused your death. Devastated, my mind was hazy, and I fell down the stairs. Even the baby wasn't saved. For these past 3 years, I searched the whole country, tortured by self-blame and guilt. In the end, I looked at the plain band worn on his ring finger. In the end, my newlywed husband tells me that he fell in love with another woman. Listening to my slightly trembling voice, Jeff's expression shifted slightly. He subconsciously touched the plain ring on his hand, where the newlywed ring I personally designed used to be worn. The moment he touched the plain ring, his eyes suddenly became clear, and he said impatiently, It's a tragic story, but what does all of this have to do with me? Looking at the indifference on his face, my very last bit of wavering completely dissolved. What did it have to do with him? Wasn't he the culprit who caused all of this? Thinking of the eyes of my parents-in-law, full of anticipation before I left the house, hoping I would bring their missing son home, my heart ached. It turned out that something even harder to accept than Jeff's death was that he had planned all of this. These past days, I was filled with grief as I told him about our past over and over again, trying to awaken his memory. Had he not felt even a bit moved? Or rather, was he mocking my pathetic state with Nora Melville? Meeting my bloodshot eyes, Jeff frowned and subconsciously took a few steps toward me. He just raised his hand. Slap. Nora slapped me right across the face, pointing at my nose and cursing furiously. What are you pretending to be aggrieved for? Chasing someone else's boyfriend all day and calling him your husband. How pathetic are you? Seeing the bright red finger marks rising on my face, a trace of shock flashed across Jeff's face. Without even thinking, he immediately pulled Nora behind him. Nora just has a blunt personality. Don't mind her. The look he gave me was full of vigilance and wariness, terrified that I would harm his beloved woman. A burning pain dulled across my face. Thinking of the conversation I had overheard inside the bar, it felt like a massive hole had been ripped open in my heart. The amnesia was an act, but his coldness and heartlessness toward me were real. So I booked a plane ticket home right there, and looked at Jeff. Don't worry, I won't disturb you two again. Since he liked to pretend to be dead, I would fulfill his wish. Early the next morning, just as I was about to leave, I suddenly received a call from my father-in-law. Lydia had a heart attack and hasn't come out of the ICU yet. She keeps muttering Jeff's name. Is he really not Jeff? Lydia was my mother-in-law's name. Hearing that she had a heart attack, I couldn't even hold the steering wheel steady. My father-in-law, Daniel, who was always calm and steady, now had a hint of a sob in his voice. I don't know if Lydia will make it through this time. I'm afraid she won't even get to see her son before she leaves. My heart sank, and I quickly turned the steering wheel around. Daniel, don't worry. I will go find him right now. The moment he opened the door and saw it was me, Jeff's face turned cold. I shoved the phone into his hand, not caring about anything else. Your mother's had a heart attack, and she just wants to see you one last time. Are you still going to pretend? Even at a time like this? Hearing that his own mother was in trouble, Jeff's expression changed drastically. He gripped the phone tightly, but just as he connected a video call, a finger with acrylics hung up the call. Nora looked at me with an attitude and slammed the phone right into my face. Are you sick? Didn't you say yesterday that you wouldn't come to harass us anymore? Anxiety flashed through Jeff's eyes as he reached back for the phone. She said Under my gaze, he changed his words mid-sentence. Her mother-in-law is in trouble and wants me to pose as her husband to comfort her. Nora snorted. What do you mean, pose as her husband? She must be lying, trying to force you to admit you are her husband. I've seen plenty of these jealousy tactics. You are not allowed to call. If you dare do it, don't touch me tonight. Seeing her angry, Jeff quickly tried to please her. All right, I won't call. Looking at his submissive behavior, I said in disbelief. Jeff, this is your mother. You've been missing for 3 years. She missed you so much that her eyes went nearly blind from crying. You can't even bear to make a single phone call to her? This might be the last time you two ever see each other. Jeff's body stiffened. Just as his lips moved, Nora tightly grabbed his arm. She looked entirely pure and innocent. As I said, my boyfriend is not your husband. How can you make him tell a lie to deceive people? Besides, he's not a doctor. Can making a phone call bring someone back to life? Can you please stop disturbing us? She rolled her eyes at me and signaled Jeff to close the door. Jeff was still hesitating, but Nora's hand had already restlessly slipped under his clothes. With that, he couldn't care about me anymore, hurriedly leaving behind a single sentence. I can't manage that much. You guys find a good doctor. The absolute heartlessness and coldness in his words left me in a daze. The door wasn't closed tightly, and the hurried gasps pierced into my ears like needles. His mother's life and death were uncertain, yet he could enjoy intimate moments of pleasure with another woman. For the first time in all these years, I truly saw the person in front of me clearly. After 3 years of searching for my husband, I finally had the answer. When I arrived at the airport, I was notified that my plane ticket had been canceled. While I was feeling confused, Jeff's friend, Randall, dragged me into a car. Didn't you come to find Jeff? Why are you going back alone? Looking at the anxiety hidden in his eyes, I said calmly. Didn't he say it himself? He isn't Jeff. Randall froze for a moment, quickly trying to fix it. You know he has amnesia, which is why he can't remember who he is. You can't be this cruel and just abandon him and leave. I sneered. Who abandoned whom? Who was the one who faked his death the moment I found out I was pregnant? Who abandoned his family and ignored them for 3 years? Before I even had a chance to question him, I happened to run into Jeff and Nora out shopping. Looking at the large and small gift boxes in their hands, I froze. Nora grabbed a handful of cheap wedding candies and shoved them into my hands, the smugness in her eyes completely impossible to hide. Jeff and I are getting married this Saturday. You should come. It'll be official then, and someone will finally give up. Jeff looked at her tenderly, his tone full of doting. We are having a shotgun wedding. In another 7 months, our baby will come into this world. Hearing his tone full of anticipation, my heart ached. Once, Jeff and I were also expecting a baby. A week before our honeymoon, I found out I was pregnant, and the entire family was overjoyed. However, while I was eagerly anticipating the arrival of the fruit of our love, he was busy plotting how to fake his death and fly away with his mistress. Even though I was carrying his own flesh and blood in my belly, it didn't cause him to waver even half a bit. If he truly didn't love me, he could have just refused this marriage. Why did he have to pretend to love me, only to deceive me until I was broken? The hard shells of the wedding candies dug into my palm, and the smug smile on Nora's face was the greatest mockery toward me. I knew clear as day that Jeff was doing this to solidify his relationship with Nora before returning to the Wingers. That way, he would have a completely justifiable reason to bring Nora back to the Wingers in the future. Meeting my gaze, Jeff did not look guilty at all. If you have time, come. I stayed silent for 2 seconds, then nodded. All right, I'll come. Perhaps some things had to be seen with your own eyes before you could truly give up. This wedding was far less grand than the one Jeff and I had back then, but it still cost a considerable amount of money. I heard from others that Jeff even borrowed quite a lot. In the past, he was the sole heir of the Wingers. He never worried about food or clothing, never lacked money in his hands, and never worked a proper job. After faking his death and living in seclusion here with Nora, he basically relied on borrowing money to survive. No wonder he was in such a rush to return to the Wingers. After all, to the Wingers, the money he borrowed was nothing but a drop in the bucket. However, Jeff didn't know that he could never go back to the Wingers. I took a light sip of wine and watched as Jeff excitedly slipped the wedding ring onto Nora's finger. That wedding ring officially put a complete end to the past 20 years of my youth. Looking at the two of them beaming with joy, I spoke calmly. I have already attended the wedding. You'll let me go home now, right? Jeff froze, a trace of panic flashing across his eyes. He thought I would cry and make a massive scene like before, but to his surprise, I looked as if I had completely accepted my fate. As if I believed he was not Jeff. If I left, though, what would he do about restoring his identity? Wait, have we met somewhere before? Jeff hastily called out to stop me, clutching his head and pretending to have a flashback. Looking at his completely atrocious acting, a trace of mockery flashed across my eyes. You must be remembering wrong. We've never met before. You simply look like my husband, that's all. I returned every single word he had said to me back then. Jeff's face darkened slightly, but he kept up his amnesia persona and didn't dare to lose his temper. Then why are so many images suddenly popping into my head? Did you and I have a wedding? He pointed at the venue and spoke with hesitation. I remember, lilies of the valley placed here, and you were wearing a mermaid-style wedding dress. Listening to him recall our original wedding, The hatred in my heart only grew deeper and deeper. Having been childhood sweethearts for 20 years, I had long decided that I would marry Jeff. For that wedding back then, I prepared a full year in advance. Every single detail was filled with my beautiful hopes for love. However, Jeff had delivered me a crushing blow. He said we were going to Macondo for our honeymoon, but on the second day after going abroad, he vanished without a trace. Back then, the one who cried until she nearly went blind wasn't just my mother-in-law, but also me. At the time, I was so consumed by heartbreak that I suffered a miscarriage, all while having to face accusations from his family. Meanwhile, Jeff was probably holding his little lover and rolling around in the sheets, right? Looking up, Jeff was staring at me with a face full of guilt. I will try hard to remember those things. Why don't you take me home to see my parents first? Maybe I could. I smiled and interrupted him. I already told you all these things before, but didn't you have zero impression of them at the time? Not only did he have zero impression, but he also looked entirely impatient and tried to chase me away. I smiled and continued. Did you drink too much and mistake these things as your own memories? I wouldn't fail to recognize my own husband. You really aren't Jeff. Hearing those words, before Jeff could even panic, Nora did first. He obviously is. I stared straight at Nora. Didn't you insist he wasn't just a moment ago? Why the sudden change of heart? Did you catch amnesia too? Nora was instantly at a loss for words. I knew exactly what she was after. She wanted to climb the social ladder through Jeff. If Jeff couldn't restore his identity, she'd be even more anxious than he was. However, they had already talked themselves into a corner. Nora had cursed me as a mistress in public too many times. Though she must have enjoyed calling me that, she had now dug her own grave. Amid the whispers from the crowd, Randall stood up abruptly and pointed at me. He is Jeff. Hazel, I know you're angry about him being with Nora, but you can't just deny who he is. His parents have been searching for 3 years. Are you really going to let them bury their own son just for your own selfish reasons? Every eye in the room fell on me, accompanied by insults that I was a vicious and heartless woman. Randall shook his head and held up his phone. I knew you'd try to stop them from reuniting, so I made a call in advance and brought them here. Jeff breathed a sigh of relief and looked at me with disappointment. Hazel, what happened to you? At first, I thought, since I was wronging you by being with Nora, I'd give her some money and break up when I returned to the Wingers. But I never expected you to be so unworthy of me giving up Nora. Watching his heartfelt performance, I curled my lip in mockery. So you want to divorce me and bring Nora into the family? Jeff paused, a trace of hesitation flickering across his face. I knew exactly what he was hesitating about. I was his childhood sweetheart. Our families were equals in business and social status. Nora, however, came from poverty and couldn't provide him with any leverage. He was the type who always wanted it all. He wouldn't have faked his death for 3 years only to reveal his tracks if he didn't want to come back. Sure enough, Jeff spoke in a low voice. For the 3 years I had amnesia, it was Nora who stayed by my side, took care of me, and kept me company. I will not abandon her no matter what. As for you, I'm willing to give you a chance to turn over a new leaf out of our past relationship. From now on, you handle the external matters, while she handles the home. And you are not allowed to pick on her. I froze for a moment, then let out a snort. He really was dreaming of having the best of both worlds. Jeff missed the sarcasm on my face. Holding Nora's hand, he said passionately, Nora is pregnant with my child. This child is Winger flesh and blood. I've already decided that he will be the future heir of the Wingers. Nora looked at me provocatively, acting coy. Isn't that too hard on Hazel? Jeff frowned. Hard on her? It's hard on you. She's narrow-minded. Letting her continue to be Mrs. Winger is already doing her a favor. Watching their act, I said flatly, did I ever agree to share a husband with Nora? Nora looked delighted. You're willing to get a divorce? Jeff's expression shifted before he finally looked at me. If you force me to choose, I have no choice but to side with Nora. I laughed out loud. You don't have to choose. Because both of you are getting out. As soon as those words fell, the door opened, and my parents-in-law walked in together. Jeff lit up, and he hurried to greet them. Dad, Mom, I'm back. Nora stepped forward, cradling her barely visible belly, fawning over them. Today is a great day. The baby in my tummy is kicking. Jeff looked at me and vented angrily. If it weren't for Hazel trying to stop us, we would have reunited as a family long ago. Dad, Mom, you see her true colors now, don't you? However, faced with their enthusiasm, Daniel shoved his hand away, frowning. Who's your dad and mom? Don't just shout blindly. Our son has been dead for a long time. The heavy double doors of the banquet hall remained wide open, the cool evening air carrying the sharp, salty tang of the coastal city inside. It rolled over. The red carpet, smelling of fresh rain and wet asphalt, a cold current that seemed to freeze the very light under the crystal chandeliers. Jeff's hand, which had been raised to grab his father's sleeve, stopped in midair. Dad. His voice carried a thin, cracked squeak that sounded absurd in the vast silent room. He took a clumsy step forward, his fingers shaking as he pointed at his own face. Dad, look at me. It's me, Jeff. Your son. Ava. Been suffering from amnesia for 3 years, but I finally remembered. Ava. Finally come home. Daniel Winger stood in the center of the aisle, his gray wool overcoat buttoned up to his chin, his posture straight and rigid as stone. Behind him stood 2 men in dark navy suits, members of the Winger family's personal security detail, and his personal assistant, carrying a leather folder. Daniel didn't look at his son's bruised face. His gaze was fixed on the space above Jeff's head, cold, level, and entirely empty of the warmth he had used when he patted my shoulder before our honeymoon 3 years ago. My son died 3 years ago in the waters of Macondo, Daniel said, his voice flat but carrying the unyielding force of a hammer blow. The search and rescue team found his clothing on the beach. The death certificate was finalized by the municipal court last winter. You are an imposter, sir, attempting to extort our family under a false identity. No. Nora shrieked, her voice losing all its sweet, fragile polish as she ran forward, her hands clutching her silk skirt. Mr. Winger, you can't say that. He's your son. He has the same face. He has the same voice. Look at him. He knows about the lilies of the valley. He knows about the wedding. The wedding details are public record, Ms. Melville, Daniel's assistant said, stepping forward and opening his leather folder. He pulled out a laminated document with a red court seal at the top. And as for the imposter, he handed a printed transcript of a digital audio file to Jeff. On Tuesday night, at exactly 10:15 p.m., a secure audio recording was captured by a private security detail outside the Blue Moon Bar in L.A., the assistant said, his voice carrying the dry, clinical neutrality of a court reporter. It contains a conversation between a man named Jeff Winger and his associate, Randall. In it, Mr. Winger admits to faking his death during his honeymoon to escape his legal marriage and secure a premarital trust fund under his mistress's name. Jeff's face went a sallow, sickly gray beneath his wedding makeup. His fingers tightened around the paper, the dry parchment crinkling with a sharp, metallic sound. Dad. He whispered, his jaw moving but no words coming out. Don't call me that, Daniel said, his green eyes locking onto his son's with a quiet, lethal disgust. A Winger heir does not crawl through the gutters of the city, borrowing money from low-life creditors under his cousin's ID just to buy expensive toys for his mistress. You wanted to play dead, Jeff. So from today on, you are dead to us. The transition from the wedding venue to the hospital was quiet, the only sound, the steady, rhythmic shuck-shuck of the truck's tires against the wet asphalt of the highway. I sat in the back of my father-in-law's car, my hands folded in my lap, my eyes fixed on the gray mist rolling over the city skyline. Beside me, Daniel remained silent, his fingers tracing the silver handle of his cane, his chest rising and falling in shallow, heavy gasps. Lydia's fever has broken, he said suddenly, his voice quiet. The doctor said. The cardiac panels are stable, but she refused to see him. When the assistant told her about the recording, she turned her face to the wall. She's strong, Daniel, I said softly, my hand reaching out to touch his sleeve. She'll get through this. We'll get through this together, Hazel, he said, his green eyes turning to meet mine with a deep, maternal warmth. The legal team has already initiated the probate separation. The 50% of the voting shares of the Winger group that were locked under Jeff's name, they've been transferred to your custody under the terms of the premarital contract. Thank you, I said. The car stopped outside the private wing of the Municipal General Hospital. I didn't go inside immediately. I stood on the wet stone steps of the entryway, looking up at the gray sky. For 3 years, I had lived in a world where my husband's shadow was the only law, where my guilt over his death was a sentence of silent, dark isolation I had executed upon my own youth. But today the shadow was gone. I walked into the lobby, took a seat in the quiet waiting area, and pulled out my tablet to review the transition files for the Winger Group's upcoming board meeting. My phone, sitting on the wood beside my tea, vibrated once. It was a message from an unknown number. It was Jeff. Hazel, please. Just 5 minutes. I'm standing outside the hospital gates. Nora. Nora is having a fit. She says the landlord is locking us out of the apartment because the credit cards are frozen. Hazel, we grew up together. You used to bring me honey lemon tea when I was sick? Please. I stared at the screen, a faint, self-deprecating smile touching my lips. We grew up together. He had remembered our 20 years of childhood history. He had remembered the honey lemon tea. But he had forgotten it all when he was sitting in the L.A. hotel room, holding his mistress in his arms, whispering that his wife's miscarriage was just a tragic story that had nothing to do with him. I clicked delete, blocked the number, and went back to my spreadsheets. The apartment in the high-rise residential district was quiet when the movers arrived on Monday morning. The fog off the harbor was heavy, turning the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the living room into a dark, blurry sheet of wet slate. Nora sat on the edge of the master bed, her silk cover-up slightly loose at the neck, her hair unwashed and wild, her face pale as paper. Her fingers were clutching her silver sapphire necklace, the one she had faked her pregnancy to get Jeff to buy last week. "What is the meaning of this?" she hissed, her voice losing all its sweet, fragile polish as my cousin Marcus, who was the senior partner of the city's largest litigation firm, walked in, followed by 2 municipal court bailiffs. "This is a formal writ of ejectment, Ms. Melville," Marcus said, handing her the paper. "Under the terms of the premarital purchase agreement, this property is the sole non-marital asset of Hazel Winger. The defendant, Jeff Winger, and any third-party occupants associated with him have 60 minutes to pack their personal belongings and vacate the premises." 60 minutes? Nora shrieked, her voice pitching high and frantic as she ran out of the kitchen. "That's impossible. My baby is 7 months along. I can't be stressed. Where am I supposed to take her things? Jeff, tell them they can't do this." Jeff didn't look at her. He was sitting on the floor near the kitchen island, his rented wedding suit wrinkled and stained with coffee, his face gray and hollowed out by a week of sleeplessness. "The movers are downstairs, Jeff," I said, my voice carrying the flat level rhythm of a logistics report. "They only have orders to carry the wooden box in the basement storage closet, the one with your grandfather's old tools. Everything else stays here." "Jeff, you can't be this cruel," Nora screamed, lunging toward me, her fingernails clawing at the air. "I'm pregnant. The doctors said I can't be stressed. If you throw us onto the street, I'll make sure the whole company knows what a heartless monster you are." But before her hand could reach my collar, the 2 bailiffs stepped between us, their heavy leather duty belts creaking as their hands rested on their taser holsters. "Ma'am, please step back," the lead bailiff said, his voice flat as cement. "If you lay a finger on the plaintiff, you will be arrested on site for domestic battery." Nora froze. Her hand slowly dropped to her side, her face turning an angry, splotchy sallow beneath her foundation. She looked at Austin, but Austin had already sat down on the floor near the counter, his head buried in his hands, his body shaking with a silent, pathetic sobbing. "You weak, spineless idiot," Nora spat, turning her venomous glare onto him. "I told you to make her sign the joint account deed. I told you she was planning to ruin us. Now look at you. You lost the apartment, you lost your job, and your mother won't even answer my texts." "Shut up, Nora," Jeff muttered, his voice hoarse and broken. "Just shut up." I didn't stay to watch them pack. I turned on my heel, walked out of the apartment, and let the heavy door slam shut behind me, leaving the parasites to devour each other in the cold. Without the Winger Group support, the Grey Corporation fell into a state of rapid, high-intensity collapse. The news of the arson and fraud audit had gone viral, turning the Grey family's high society reputation into a public joke. The local newspapers played the story of the silent savior on every page, with dozens of former partners coming forward to describe the years of systematic abuse and neglect I had endured while building my fiancé's company. I sat in my cozy, sunlit study in my new downtown apartment, a cup of hot chamomile tea in my hand, reviewing the final draft of my civil suit. My phone, sitting on the wood beside my tea, vibrated once. It was a news notification from the city. Former billionaire Jeff Winger's bankruptcy case concluded. Court orders liquidation of remaining personal assets to fund the Winger Memorial Trust. Beneath the headline was a small photo of Jeff standing outside the municipal courthouse. He was wearing a cheap, off-the-rack gray coat, his hair completely white, his eyes hollow, entirely free of the billions that had once made him untouchable. And as for Nora, she was currently serving her second year of a 15-year sentence in a state penitentiary, her name permanently removed from the company registry, her family's empire dismantled by the creditors and the prosecutors. I looked at the screen for a long, quiet moment. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the sharp, twisting pain of the trauma that had kept me awake during those cold winter nights in the apartment. The boy who had faked his illness and the woman who had faked her pregnancy were gone, reduced to simple, dry statistics in a folder I would never open again. I closed the laptop, put my phone on silent, and picked up my tea. A gust of wind off the ocean caught my hair, blowing a few dry leaves across the wooden deck. I looked out at the endless horizon of the sea, where the sun was beginning to break through the fog, casting a wide, golden path across the dark blue water. I smiled, my heart completely light, my mind completely quiet, and my path finally beautifully my own.